Tony Khan gave an interview to Scott Fishman of TV Insider this week and had the following to say, continuing to tease some major announcements coming for the company. It's a very exciting time in AEW for many reasons. We're days away from AEW All In on August 25th. This is the most important and exciting time in AEW's history. In addition to what is happening in the ring, there are so many exciting things happening behind the scenes at AEW right now. We're on the verge of the most important announcements in the history of AEW. There are multiple aspects. The arrival of these announcements is imminent. We'll have big news that could come at any time. Isn't that the best kind of wrestling surprise? When you know something is coming and you want it and it's exciting, but you're not sure when it's going to happen. You have that feeling that it's going to happen. In this case, I have more than a feeling, to paraphrase Boston. I have been working on this for a long time. We have a great team here. The future of AEW is very bright. One of these announcements that he's referring to, the main announcement, is obviously the upcoming rights deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. It was announced, by the way, this week that Kathleen Finch, the chairman and CEO of their U.S. networks, which include TBS and TNT, will be retiring at the end of this year after 25 years with the company. She has been a strong proponent of AEW. You will often see her quoted in any press releases mentioning AEW. Obviously, she would be given her position there. She is going to be replaced by Channing Dungey, the chairman of their television group that has been tapped to be her successor. I don't see this having any short-term effects on AEW or their proposed deal. That deal is going to be announced any week now, long before Finch steps down. But whatever relationship Tony Khan may have with her, it's always tough, when you have to work with a new person, and that new person has the power to make changes if they feel things aren't going well. Where her head is at, this new person, when it comes, and I say new, I mean she's been with the company, but where her head is at when it comes to AEW and pro wrestling, we don't know. But this is not going to have any effect on this new deal that Tony has been teasing, because I think the deal is all but done. They're just waiting for the right time to announce it. And maybe that time is next week, tied in with the Wembley show, which is next Sunday. On TNT on Tuesday with JD, I said that I thought the other announcement that Tony was teasing, because he was teasing announcements, plural. I said that it was likely their U.S. Stadium show. Well, that came on Thursday with the announcement that All In next year will be coming to the Lone Star State of Texas. They held a press conference to make the announcement that All In 2025 will emanate from Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas on Saturday, July 12th. So it's going to be a month earlier than usual. In attendance at the press conference was Jim Ross. And no, not that Jim Ross. The mayor of Arlington, Texas, Jim Ross. I saw a photo of this guy sitting at the table with his name card in front of him, and I thought to myself, boy, JR sure does look different. He looks a lot healthier than he did on Dynamite last week in that sit-down interview with Bryan Danielson. This will mark the first ever AEW pay-per-view in Texas and the first ever pro wrestling show at Globe Life Field, which, for those who don't know, is the home of the Texas Rangers baseball team. It has a retractable roof, so it is a retractable roof stadium. It fits around 40,000 for baseball games. For other events, they could probably fit somewhere around 45,000 or so. That doesn't mean that it will be set up for 40,000. I mean, I would imagine they will set it up for maybe 25 or 30 and then open more sections as needed if tickets sell. I mean, that's what they did for their Wembley show last year. WWE does the same thing, even with their arena shows. That SmackDown show on Friday in Orlando, which had that great crowd, they just kept adding more and more seats. And every time they would add more seats, they would sell out. You only open what you think you can sell. If it sells well, then you open more. That's not unusual. Tony Khan called the Texas show the first stadium show in the United States for AEW, which I'm sure makes the Arthur Ashe folks feel just wonderful hearing that. Like, what the fuck? They've already run 3 shows at a stadium here in New York. They have another one coming up in 4 weeks. I guess that doesn't count. I guess it's only a tennis stadium, so I guess to them that doesn't count, even though that's bullshit. I mean, is there a certain capacity at which a building officially becomes a stadium? It's like their balls drop and they officially become a stadium. I'd love to know. I think it's smart for them to move All In out of London to a smaller venue next year. It's the law of diminishing returns for them there if they just keep running London every single year. The first year, they sold 80,000 seats. This year, they're going to have over half that. At last check, they expanded the setup for next weekend to 53,000. They have about 48,000 tickets sold. 50,000 is a healthy crowd. That's a great crowd. But if they come back again in 2025, it's going to be even less than that. The novelty wears off. Look at Arthur Ashe Stadium for Grand Slam. Their first show to 20,000 fans. They nearly packed the entire place out. I think it fits 23. When they came back a second time the following year, they were down to 13,000. Last year, they dropped to 11,000. This year, so far, we're still a month out. But according to WrestleTix, I mean, this is embarrassing. They've only sold 3,500 tickets for a setup of 4,800. Now, that's going to go up. Some of these big AEW shows, they tend to have a lot of late movement. It's set up for 4,800. I'm sure it'll end up being set up for a lot more than that, I would hope. But I mean, look at what they did year one in New York and look at what they're going to do next month. That's a hell of a drop. And if the product was hot, they wouldn't have any issue packing the place in. Moving it to Texas for the first time, I think they'll do well. Some people may clown them, about running a venue like that at a time when their domestic attendance is struggling. But if they can move 25,000 tickets for All In next year, then I think it's worth it for them to try. Anything more than that, it would have to be considered a success. Now, Tony also made it clear that they would be returning to London in 2026. He didn't say Wembley, but he said we are going to be returning to London in 2026. And that lends credence to something I said a few weeks ago, which is that WWE could very well be running SummerSlam next year at Wembley Stadium. If both companies were to run Wembley within weeks of each other, that would be a disaster for Tony Khan. It would be a losing battle for AEW. Because in the battle of All In against SummerSlam in the same market within weeks of each other, I guarantee you the majority of people, especially these tickets are not cheap. And if they had to pick one over the other, they're going to go for the novelty of the first SummerSlam there in 30 plus years. So they were fighting a losing battle. Now we find out that not only is All In moving from London to Texas next year, but they're just going to skip that year and come back again in 2026. Now, why would that be? SummerSlam is in Minneapolis in 2026, but we still don't know where it's going to be held in 2025. It's wide open right now. What we do know is that Nick Khan and Paul Levesque, they were recently in London to meet with the mayor about bringing WrestleMania to the UK. It's very likely their conversations were about more than just WrestleMania. Think Indianapolis and that big deal they just signed, right? To bring Mania and SummerSlam and the Royal Rumble to Lucas Oil Stadium over the next 8 years. I think skipping Wembley next year is being done for a reason, and WWE may have something to do with that. Just my feeling. By the way, AEW is bringing World's End to Orlando on December 28th. WWE just announced this week, I think yesterday, that they are running a live event that same night in Orlando, about half an hour away, which I'm sure is just a complete coincidence. But they sure do know how to push Tony's buttons, don't they? So the All In Texas announcement, that was not the only AEW stadium news to break this week. Now, AEW has not confirmed this one yet, but on Wednesday, the Sporting News reported exclusively that AEW could be headed down under with a blockbuster stadium show in 2025. It says plans for the company's maiden Australian show are well advanced, with sources confirming AEW power brokers have been scouting venues along Australia's east coast. It says Sydney's Allianz Stadium, Melbourne's Marvel Stadium, and Brisbane's Suncorp Stadium are potential landing spots for the historic show, with entertainment company TEG understood to be backing the event. A date for the possible AEW show in Australia is still to be locked in, with the promotion schedule wide open for 2025. A year-opening pay-per-view, Wrestle Dynasty, has been confirmed for the Tokyo Dome on January 5th, a sign of AEW's commitment to global expansion, with an announcement on a potential Aussie show expected shortly. So there's enough detail in that story that there's definitely something going on, and they are going to be going to Australia. It's just a matter of waiting for the announcement and which stadium they're going to be running. So yeah, I mean, if you count that Wrestle Dynasty show, and I mean, it's a New Japan hosted show. It's a bit of a stretch, but yes, they have the second day of the Tokyo Dome next year in January is Wrestle Dynasty. And that's going to have AEW talent on that show. In fact, AEW and Ring of Honor, which is all Tony Khan. So their talent is going to be all over that card. That, plus the Arlington show in July, plus a possible Australia show, and maybe even another Arthur Ashe show, that would technically be 4 planned stadium shows for AEW in 2025, which is very ambitious. But they really need to shore up their domestic attendance. It could be that doing more residencies, in smaller venues, like the one they're just wrapping up now in Arlington, which has been a success for them, at their esports stadium. They got paid to run there. That might be the model. That might be the way to go financially, to do more of those. Now, you can't do those all the time, but a few times a year, you do residencies in different places, right? You settle on one venue for a number of weeks. You get paid to run there. That might be a winning model for AEW. But they still need to get out on the road to other places and bigger buildings, and they need to figure out how to get more people into those buildings. It's been a problem for them now for a while, and they just can't seem to figure it out. It really boils down to 2 things. Better local promotion in those towns, which I feel like in some ways they've gotten better at, but they're still not great at doing local promotion in some of these markets. That's number 1. Number 2, a better television product that makes people want to buy a ticket to come see their stars. And they've got lots of stars and big names on their roster, and names from other places and homegrown talent that have been built up now over the last 5 years. But they have to market them in a way where, people are going to want to buy a ticket to come see them. Some people say, well, WWE being so hot right now is to the detriment of AEW. Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it, especially at a time when tickets are very expensive. And if WWE is coming to town and then maybe a couple months later AEW is coming to town, there are families, there are people. And I think it's worse for families if you've got 2, 3, 4 kids. It's like going to a baseball game here in New York. I mean, you got a family of 4, it'll cost you $100 at least. Actually, you factor in parking, it's going to be a hell of a lot more than that to take at a baseball game. So I can see that. I can see where if you're a wrestling fan and you have a choice between the 2, WWE's the hot ticket right now, you might choose them over AEW. That's one way to look at it. I would counter by saying that as WWE goes, so goes the rest of wrestling. Or that's how it should be. A rising tide raises all ships. Clearly, that's not the case right now for AEW, and they need to fix that.